Consider it a housewarming gift, Evelyn said, her perfectly manicured hands extending the wrapped package toward me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as I accepted the oddly shaped parcel, its wrapping paper slightly torn at the edges. The weight of it surprised me, heavier than I expected, and something shifted inside as I set it on our new dining room table. My name is Sarah Williams, and at 32, I thought I'd finally gotten used to my mother-in-law's peculiar way of showing affection, but nothing could have prepared me for what lay beneath that faded wrapping paper. "Go ahead, open it," she urged, that familiar hint of satisfaction in her voice. The same tone she used when commenting on my interesting choice of career as an art teacher or my unique approach to decorating our home. I carefully pulled back the paper, revealing what appeared to be an antique mirror. At first glance, it might have been beautiful, an ornate golden frame with intricate Victorian details. But as I lifted it from the wrapping, my heart sank. A large crack ran diagonally across the glass, splintering into smaller fissures like a spider's web. "It suits you, don't you think?" Evelyn's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I found it in our attic. Thought you might appreciate something with character." She emphasized the last word, her eyes flickering to the various vintage pieces I carefully curated for our new home. My husband, Thomas, was in the kitchen preparing coffee, blissfully unaware of the tension in the dining room. This was how it always went, Evelyn's subtle jabs delivered when we were alone, her perfectly crafted persona of the doting mother-in-law appearing whenever others were present. "Thank you," I managed, running my fingers along the frame. Despite the broken glass, there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. The craftsmanship in the frame alone was exquisite, even beneath years of tarnish and neglect. "Well," Evelyn sighed, adjusting her designer handbag on her shoulder, "I suppose not everyone can afford new things. Some of us have to make do with broken pieces." Her words cut deeper than the cracks in the mirror, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. After she left, Thomas emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee. "Everything okay? What did Mom bring us?" I showed him the mirror, watching his face fall slightly. "Oh, well, that's thoughtful of her." He was always trying to see the best in his mother, even when her actions spoke volumes about her true intentions. "It's perfect, actually," I said, surprising both of us. An idea was already forming in my mind, something that would either prove to be brilliant or disastrous. That evening, after Thomas had gone to bed, I sat in my small home studio, examining the mirror under the warm glow of my work lamp. I'd always had a knack for seeing potential in damaged things. It's what drew me to teaching art to troubled teens, helping them find beauty in their own chaos. The frame was genuine gold leaf under years of tarnish, and the glass, despite its breaks, was old mercury glass. The kind they stopped making over a century ago due to its toxic manufacturing process. This wasn't just some broken mirror, it was a piece of history. I opened my laptop and began researching restoration techniques, my excitement growing with each article I read. But I didn't want to simply restore it. I wanted to transform it, to take Evelyn's intended insult and turn it into something extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the project. During my free periods at school, I researched Victorian art techniques. My students became intrigued, watching as I experimented with different methods during our art classes. "Mrs. Williams, are you really going to use real gold?" Maria, one of my most talented students, asked as I demonstrated gold leafing techniques. "Not just gold," I smiled, showing her my sketches. "We're going to learn about kintsugi too, the Japanese art of repairing broken things with gold, making them more beautiful than before." The mirror became more than just a project. It became a symbol of everything I wanted to prove to Evelyn, to myself, to my students. Every crack in the glass would be transformed into a golden river, every tarnished detail restored and enhanced. I worked late into the nights, carefully applying gold leaf to each fracture, turning the spider web of breaks into a deliberate pattern of gleaming lines. The frame itself I restored with a mixture of traditional and modern techniques, bringing out details that had been hidden under decades of neglect. Some nights, Thomas would find me in my studio, covered in gold leaf and restoration compounds. "You're really putting a lot into this," he observed one evening, bringing me a cup of tea. "It's not just about the mirror anymore," I admitted, showing him how the broken glass now caught the light differently, the gold-filled cracks creating patterns that seemed almost alive. Mom's coming for dinner next week, he mentioned cautiously. Should we put the mirror away before she visits? I shook my head, a small smile playing at my lips. No, actually, I think it's time we gave it a proper place of honor, right above the fireplace in the living room. What Evelyn didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that I'd been documenting every step of the restoration. My students had helped me create a video series about transforming broken things into art, and it had started gaining attention online. The techniques we developed weren't just beautiful, they were innovative. As I hung the mirror in its new place, catching my reflection in the now golden network of restored glass, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. Evelyn had given me this mirror to make a point about being broken, about not being good enough. But in doing so, she handed me exactly what I needed to prove her wrong. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a transformation that would leave her speechless. The evening of the family dinner arrived, and I could feel my heart racing as I made final adjustments to the dining room. The mirror hung proudly above the fireplace, its golden veins catching the soft light from the chandelier. I'd arranged the room so it would be impossible to miss, the focal point of our entire living space. The table looks beautiful, Thomas said, adjusting his tie. Though Mom might comment on us using the casual plates. He tried to make it sound like a joke, but we both knew it was probably true. Evelyn had a way of finding fault with even the most carefully planned details. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Evelyn's punctuality was one of her many points of pride. I smoothed my dress and took a deep breath, reminding myself that tonight wasn't about her approval. It was about something much bigger. Sarah, Thomas, she greeted us, air kissing our cheeks. Behind her, my father-in-law Robert offered a warm, genuine smile. He'd always been the buffer between Evelyn's sharp edges and the rest of the world. I brought a lovely Bordeaux. I assume you have proper wine glasses. Before I could respond, she stepped into the living room and froze. The wine bottle slipped from her grasp, and Thomas barely caught it before it hit the floor. Her eyes were fixed on the mirror, wide with disbelief. What have you done? She whispered, stepping closer to the fireplace. The mirror she'd given me as an insult now dominated the room, its restored frame gleaming with authentic gold leaf. Every crack transformed into an intricate pattern that seemed to flow like liquid gold across the surface. Beautiful, isn't it? I said calmly, watching her reaction in the mirror's reflection. Your gift inspired quite a journey. But it was broken, she stammered, reaching out to touch the glass before pulling her hand back. The frame was worthless. Actually, Robert spoke up, adjusting his glasses as he examined the mirror. This is extraordinary craftsmanship. The technique you've used here, is this kintsugi inspired? I smiled, genuinely pleased by his interest. Yes, combined with traditional Victorian restoration methods. My students helped me research the historical techniques. Students? Evelyn turned to me, her composed facade cracking slightly. Oh, you haven't seen the videos? I pulled out my phone, opening the series that had now gathered over 1 million views. The restoration process became quite popular online. We've had museums reach out about the techniques we developed. Thomas, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward proudly. Sarah's been invited to speak at the National Restoration Convention next month. They're particularly interested in her method of combining Eastern and Western restoration philosophies. The color drained from Evelyn's face as she watched the video. There it was, her worthless gift being transformed step by step, each crack filled with gold, each tarnished detail restored to its former glory. But it wasn't just restored. It was reimagined into something entirely new. The museum curator estimated its value at about $60,000 now. I added quietly, watching her hands tremble slightly as she handed back my phone. But of course, it's not about the money. It's about seeing the potential in things others might consider broken. Dinner that evening was unusually quiet. Evelyn, normally quick with criticism about everything from my cooking to my choice of tablecloth, seemed lost in thought. Several times I caught her glancing at the mirror, her expression unreadable. As we served dessert, Robert cleared his throat. You know, Sarah, this reminds me of something. Evelyn, didn't your grandmother have a collection of Victorian mirrors? The ones in the attic. Evelyn's spoon clattered against her plate. Robert, I don't think. Yes, there must be at least a dozen up there, he continued, even missing or ignoring his wife's discomfort. All in various states of disrepair. We've been meaning to get them appraised for years. They're family heirlooms, Evelyn cut in sharply, not some common craft project. Actually, I said, meeting her gaze steadily, I'd be happy to take a look at them. These restoration techniques work best when applied to pieces with genuine historical value. My students would love to document the process for their portfolio. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. We both knew what she'd intended when she gave me that mirror, to remind me of what she thought I was. Broken, worthless, not good enough for her son or her family. Instead, I'd taken her weapon and turned it into my triumph. The articles about your restoration work have been fascinating, Robert added, pulling out his tablet. Did you see this one in Antiques Quarterly? They're calling it a revolution in historical preservation. As Robert shared the article with Thomas, I watched Evelyn's carefully maintained composure continue to crack. Like the mirror she'd given me, her perfect surface was starting to show its flaws. But unlike the mirror, these weren't flaws that could be filled with gold. More wine? I offered, noting her empty glass. For the first time since I'd known her, Evelyn seemed at a loss for words. She simply nodded, her eyes drifting back to the mirror that now served as a testament to everything she'd gotten wrong about me. What she'd intended as an insult had become the catalyst for something extraordinary. Those broken pieces she thought would define me had instead revealed a strength she never expected to find. The evening was far from over, and I could feel the shift in the air. Something had changed, not just in the way Evelyn saw me, but in the way I saw myself. Those cracks she tried to emphasize had become the very things that made me shine. And I was just getting started. A week after the dinner, I received an unexpected call from Robert. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm but hesitant, "I was wondering if you might have time to come look at those mirrors in the attic." "Evelyn?" "Well, she's been up there all week, trying to sort through things." I found myself driving to the Victorian mansion the next Saturday morning. Thomas had offered to come, but somehow I knew this needed to be between me and his mother. The house was quiet when I arrived, except for muffled sounds coming from the attic. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking with age, until I reached the top. There sat Evelyn, surrounded by dust-covered mirrors of various sizes, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. "Oh," she said, looking up as I entered. "Robert called you, didn't he?" Her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. Instead, she sounded tired, almost vulnerable. "He did," I acknowledged, carefully making my way through the maze of antiques. "These are incredible pieces." I stopped in front of a particularly ornate mirror, its frame dulled by decades of neglect but clearly masterfully crafted. "They were my grandmother's," Evelyn said softly, running her fingers along the tarnished frame. "She collected them her whole life. When she passed, I couldn't bear to. I just packed them all the way up here." I knelt beside her, examining the mirror in her hands. "This one's Austrian, probably 1850s, I said. "The craftsmanship is remarkable, even under all this tarnish." "How do you know all this?" she asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine curiosity in her voice rather than criticism. "Research, mostly. When you gave me that mirror, I wanted to understand its history, its value. These pieces tell stories, Evelyn. They've survived world wars, crossed oceans, witnessed generations of families." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke so softly I almost missed it. "I was wrong. About the mirrors. About you." She set down the mirror she was holding, meeting my eyes directly. "I gave you that mirror to be cruel. I thought you were too simple, too ordinary for this family. But you saw something I never did. You didn't just fix what was broken. You made it more beautiful because of its flaws." I sat down beside her, dust swirling in the streams of light from the attic window. "Why did you really keep these mirrors up here?" Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, because I was afraid of failing them, of not doing justice to my grandmother's collection. It was easier to let them gather dust than risk doing the wrong thing. For the first time, I saw past Evelyn's perfect facade to the insecurity beneath. Her criticism of others had always been a shield, protecting her from her own fears of inadequacy. "You know," I said carefully, "my students have been looking for their next restoration project. These mirrors, they're exactly what we've been waiting for." "Your students?" She looked uncertain. "We could document everything, preserve the history. These pieces deserve to be seen, to tell their stories. And who better to share those stories than the granddaughter who loved them enough to keep them safe all these years?" Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, the first real emotion I'd ever seen from her. I wouldn't even know where to begin. That's why you have me, I smiled. We can start small, maybe with this one. I picked up the Austrian mirror she'd been holding. Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. The attic became our workshop, a place where barriers slowly crumbled like the dust we cleaned from each mirror. Evelyn knew stories about every piece, where her grandmother had found them, what historical events they'd witnessed. I taught her restoration techniques, and she shared family histories that brought each mirror to life. My students were thrilled to be part of the project. We created a new video series, Reflections of the Past, Restoring Family History. It wasn't just about the technical aspects of restoration anymore. It was about healing, about bridging generations through shared purpose. The day we hung the first restored mirror, the Austrian piece, in Evelyn's dining room, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. I spent so many years afraid of imperfection, she admitted. But you showed me that the broken places, when filled with gold and love, become the most beautiful parts of all. Our story spread beyond just the antique community. People connected with the message of transformation, of finding beauty in broken things, of healing family relationships through shared creativity. The mirrors became a metaphor for something deeper, how we view ourselves, our families, our flaws. A year later, we hosted a gallery showing of the restored collection. Each mirror hung proudly, their gold-filled cracks telling stories of resilience and renewal. But the centerpiece was that first mirror, the one Evelyn had given me as an insult, now transformed into the catalyst that had changed everything. You know, Evelyn said, standing beside me at the gallery opening, I gave you that mirror thinking it would reflect your flaws. Instead, it reflected mine and showed me how to make them beautiful. I squeezed her hand gently. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we don't intend to give. Thomas found us later, sharing coffee and restoration plans for the remaining mirrors. He shook his head in amazement. If someone had told me a year ago that my wife and mother would be business partners. Partners? I laughed. More like co-conspirators in mirror rescue missions. Evelyn smiled, a real, warm smile that reached her eyes. Well, someone has to keep the family legacy alive. And who better than the daughter who taught me to see beauty in broken things? As we stood there, surrounded by the gleaming mirrors that had brought us together, I realized that some reflections show us more than just our image. They show us who we can become when we choose to fill the cracks with gold instead of shame. The broken mirror that was meant to hurt me had instead created something far more precious than any antique, a genuine bond with the woman who had once tried to break my spirit. Together, we have learned that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the pieces we think are beyond repair.